People who know Clonakilty are familiar with the 1798 monument near the centre of the town. The figure depicted on the monument is Taigh O'Donovan Osna, who was the leader of the local rebels or United Irishmen at the Battle of the Big Cross in 1798. The main road from Clonakilty to Bandon in 1798 went up what is now McCurtain Hill, through Shannon Vale and on to Ballinascarthy. It was on this road that the battle took place on the 19th of June. In the last quarter of the 18th century, the United States Revolutionary War started in 1776. The French Revolution began in 1789, and the wave of revolution came into Ireland with the establishment of the United Irishmen in 1791. Its aim was to bring about independence from Britain. One of the main leaders of the United Irishmen was Theobald Wolfe Tone. Following the attempted landing of a French fleet in Bantry Bay in December 1796, West Cork was very heavily garrisoned by the British. In the spring of 1798, British officer Sir John Moore, who had the reputation of being more humane than others, took over command of 3,000 British troops, made up of regulars, militiamen and yeomen. Beginning on the 2nd of May, British soldiers with their distinctive red coats went throughout West Cork collecting arms, burning houses and terrorising the people. Sir John Moore once saved a blacksmith from being hanged by the yeomen at Barrysall near Timoleague. Moore himself wrote in his diary, "The moment the red coat appears, everybody flees." He also mentioned that they captured 800 croppy pikes and 3,400 guns of various types. Most were in bad condition. After this success, as far as Moore was concerned, West Cork was no longer a threat, and he moved up the country with most of his troops at the end of May. In the meantime, replacement croppy pikes were being made in blacksmiths' forges, such as in Santry's forge at Lisvard village, and by the blacksmith Desmond, known as Undasun Goa, in his forge at Ballymakeon, which was located around this bend on the Clonakilty-Timoleague road. Local United Irishmen were also training and drilling with pikes in remote places, like here in Park na Buachaillí at Keelbree, just north of Clonakilty. In June 1798, a detachment of British troops called the Westmeath Militia, who were nearly all Irishmen, were stationed in what was then the new military barracks at the top of Barrack Hill in Clonakilty. This building is now the Garda station. The officer in charge of the militia was Sir Hugh O'Reilly, who later changed his name to Nugent to fulfil the conditions of an inheritance, and he came from Ballinlough Castle in County Westmeath. The British authorities had discovered that some of the 200 Westmeaths in Clonakilty had secretly joined United Irishmen, and it was decided to move the Westmeaths to Bandon and replace them with 100 members of a Scottish regiment called the Caithness Legion. The United Irishmen in the Clonakilty area got word of the planned exchange, and it was decided that they would confront the Westmeath militia on their journey to Bandon, with the hope that a large portion of the Westmeaths would join up with the rebels. En route to Bandon, the detachment of the Westmeaths stopped at Shannon Vale to water their horses in the Arrigadine River, in front of Shannon Vale House. On resuming their journey, when the militia reached the place between the Big Cross and the Croppy Crossroads, they were surrounded by hundreds of United Irishmen, who attacked from the high ground on the left. The leader of the rebels was Taigh O'Donovan Osna, who came from this house in the townland of Lochnaluha, not too far from where Darra Agricultural College is today. Taigh Osna is reputed to have cut the reins of Sir Hugh O'Reilly's horse and asked for his surrender, but one of O'Reilly's men, a Sergeant Cummins, shot Taigh Osna, and Cummins in turn was shot by one of his own men. This proves that at least some of the Westmeath militia had switched their allegiance to the rebel side, and the United Irishmen may have assumed that when they surrounded the militia, the Westmeath men would have joined up with them. A serious skirmish then developed, and it seemed that the rebels were getting the better hand, almost capturing the 2 6-pounder cannon that the militia had with them. Suddenly the replacement regiment, the Cottonist Legion, arrived on the scene from the Ballinascarty side, and they fired a number of volleys at the United Irishmen. This, combined with the artillery rounds fired from the 6-pounders, eventually scattered the United Irishmen in all directions. However, Sir Hugh O'Reilly paid tribute to the United Irishmen when he said, "They retired without precipitation and reformed again and again. Some lost their lives in recovering the dead bodies of their comrades." It is reckoned that as well as Tyganasna, over 100 United Irishmen died at what later became known as the Battle of the Big Cross. Officially, Sergeant Cummins and Private Edward Walker were the two men who died on the Westmeath or British side. However, some sources put British casualties at a higher number. After the battle, the remains of the rebel leaders, including the body of Tyganasna, were dragged behind horses or wagons into Clonakilty. Folklore tells us that up to the time the road between the Big Cross and Clonakilty was tarmacked in the 1950s, even on the wettest of days, there was always a dry line on the road where Tig's body was dragged. The rebels' bodies were later left lying in front of the town hall in Clonakilty for a number of days as a warning to the locals. Afterwards, the bodies were thrown into the crab hole just below the quays, which was later called the Croppy Hole. The location of the Croppy Hole is no longer known, but this plaque stands close to the spot today. Relatives of the leaders recovered the bodies from the Croppy Hole, and it is thought that Tyganasna was buried in Ballin Temple graveyard near Dara. Sergeant Cummins and Private Walker were buried in Kilgariff Church of Ireland graveyard in the centre of Clonakilty. The location of these graves is now forgotten, but wreaths were placed on the graves of the two soldiers on the anniversary of the Big Cross up to the middle of the last century. There has always been a debate among historians as to where the Battle of the Big Cross actually took place on the road between Shannonvale and Ballinascarty. Sir Hugh O'Reilly gives us some clues from his account in the following lines. The rebels took up the best position on the whole march. The attack was made from a height on the left of our column of march. When they regained the height, I could perceive they were joined by a considerable force. I saw that the enemy was filing off a high flank with an intent to take possession of our guns. It is my belief that the high ground he is talking about is on the left of this photograph, or the area marked with green dots in the map. Immediately after the battle, one of the United Irishmen, who was a tailor and had taken part in the action, was captured by the militia at the battle site and sentenced to be hanged. 2 horse carts with the shafts raised were brought together to form an improvised scaffold. When they went to execute the tailor, his feet touched the ground, so they lowered him and they dug a hole for his feet. On the second attempt, the tailor was hanged. In the aftermath of the Big Cross, British forces carried out a lot of raids and atrocities against the civilian population. One such incident is reputed to have happened in the townland of Ballinmacune, which is just south of the main road near Clonakilty rugby pitch. 2 redcoats chased 2 young women into a farmyard located in a field which is now on the farm of the White family. The soldiers followed the women into a cabin, but they got more than they bargained for when the women turned on them with 4-pronged pikes, killing the 2 soldiers. The soldiers' bodies were buried nearby in this field, which is now on the farm of the O'Neill family. While the Battle of the Big Cross was a military failure, it had a huge influence on future generations of West Cork revolutionaries, including the Fenian Jeremiah O'Donovan Rossa and Michael Collins. Michael Collins' grandfather was John Collins, and his first wife's maiden name was Fitzpatrick. She died in 1798 as a result of some incident involving militiamen. The details of the incident were not passed down. John Collins got married again, and his second wife was Mary O'Sullivan, who would be Michael Collins' grandmother. Michael John Collins, the father of Michael Collins, was taught in a head school in the 1820s by Diarmuid O'Sullivan, who had once studied to be a priest in the continent in the 1700s and had known Theobald Wolfe Tone. One man who had a big influence on Michael Collins when he was growing up was James Santry the blacksmith in Lissavard village. Santry was always telling Collins and his school friends how his grandfather, another blacksmith, had made the croppy pikes in 1798. At the time of his death at the Battle of the Big Cross, Teigen was engaged to a local girl called Eleanor. It was thought that she was O'Donovan Deal from the townland of Derryvareen in the parish of Rossmore. It was also claimed that even though Teigen came from the townland of Lochanalluha, that he spent the night before the Big Cross in this house, which was the homestead of the O'Donovan Deals at Derryvareen. Eleanor wrote a queen for her beloved Teig, which was sung or recited around the Clonakilty area up to about 1900. By the mid-1990s, what was left of the house where Teigen lived at Lochanalluha was in a dangerous condition. So the roof, front wall and gables were removed, and in 1998 a plaque was unveiled in front of the remaining back wall. The stone removed from the Teigen homestead was taken to a site located a mile to the east in the neighbouring townland of Ballinroher and incorporated into the 1798 memorial on the grounds of the Michael Collins Centre at Castleview. The memorial is a life-size replica of a medieval church site and graveyard. Some of the graves are marked with croppy pikes. The Michael Collins Centre at Castleview will reopen full-time for off-road visitors on Monday the 13th of July until mid-September. The museum houses a large collection of artefacts from the Irish Revolutionary period from 1916 to 1923, including some personal items which belong to Michael Collins. Illustrated talks on the life of Michael Collins are delivered 3 times daily. The outside exhibits include the 1798 memorial, a life-size recreation of a firing squad execution yard, and a life-size recreation of the Ballinablaw ambush site with military vehicles.
At the famed Big Cross we proudly wore our ancient flag of green, with bagpipes tuned the rising moon stole over the Arcadine. From town and glen came marching men once more to commemorate where Teigen bravely fell in the glorious 98. The pikemen mustered at the dawn, each swore to be free. They thronged around their captain then with men from famed Kilbree. The smouldering fires of liberty that day were set aglow, when foemen reel from flashing steel and many were laid low.